Okay, you're on.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's see what page fire starts on here.
I don't know, the one after the police. Just a couple of comments where you're looking for that sheet.
I don't think we numbered it.
No, when I do the next revision, I'll number them for you, but
Okay,
I didn't have to print them yet. The things are a little bit different this year. There's a new code that goes into effect 1/1/19 for insurance for cancer coverage that we're mandated to cover. It's a number that the chief did not really know what to put in, but he worked up
It's
a
a
number.
guess. I don't really think the coverage is available yet, but it's an educated guess.
And the reserves, which are in the last page of the general, we eliminated the fire department equipment reserve because he's exhausted that, bought his air packs and doesn't need it, but he did increase the truck for the engine reserve by 20, and we left the same for the command vehicle, 5,000 in the reserves. The only other comments, the two codes that the chief has no responsibility, that's the truck room rent, and we know what that number is based on the agreement that you entered into, and workers' comp, as best that we can guess, the 33,000 that I put in is gonna be sufficient. As far as expenditures, I only have one comment, and I didn't catch it. You've got for 35 portable radio batteries under equipment at $46.50 a piece. I think they should be under contractual.
Because we buy them every 2 years.
No, because
Or
they're
three.
$46 a piece, and that's not really a capitalized item, equipment only is. But I'm not gonna move it over. But maybe future year, maybe you should consider putting any battery replacements. You do have pager repairs and batteries under contractual.
Two separate items, but yeah.
But that's the only comment. It's not gonna change the total dollars, they're all gonna stay the same. It's just that, maybe I will move out of equipment, that one item, put it in contractual. Huh?
If you want.
Other than that, his budget has gone down,
I have one question. The truck room rent,
yeah.
that looks like it's lower this year.
No,
Oh, I'm looking in the wrong column.
it adopted at 25.5 and we're raising it to 25.9. And I believe that's what's in the agreement. Workers' comp, we spent last, in the 16-17 budget, 31.3, and I'm leaving it at 33,000 for that coverage. And the new item is the 6,000, which in the chief's letter, I think, you talk about that in here. Yes.
Yeah.
And we'll know better once the coverage is available and how much it's gonna cost.
It's per firefighter, but it's
Yeah.
interior firefighters only we have to hold it for, so
So,
that number is less than the total membership.
yeah, so, it's as close a number as we can come up with in
There's no
March.
choice of,
Eric,
yeah.
so how many interior firefighters are there?
It fluctuates.
Approximately.
We're under 20.
Under 20?
My goal is to get it to 20.
Okay.
So that was.
So that's the number we need to use?
what?
Yeah, I mean,
Makes
that's
sense.
what I figured. There's some other states that have this, and that's where those numbers came from. And the coverage is limited. There's maximums for certain things. That way, the insurance companies will be able to come up with a product that won't be too expensive because it's not an open-ended coverage. Like, there is a death benefit, a couple things, but everything is spelled out, so.
But we felt we had to put something in.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
We don't know what the number really is gonna be, but if it's close to 6, we're covered. If it's 20,000, well, we gotta if it's only 2,000, well, we over budgeted. But based on his research, he felt that that would be a reasonable number.
Okay.
Street administration went from,
We're not
jumping
in
in.
fire. Oh, this doesn't look like street.
Okay, so Eric, the budget is good. As noted there, it's lower than last year's. That deserves to be mentioned. And also, for the board to, not so much think about, but to know, I think, where our fire equipment, i.e. trucks, are becoming of age. And so shortly down the road, some of these eventually, well, they all eventually, as you know, have to be replaced, but they're all around, you got 17, 23, and 19,
Right, I mean,
so.
engines traditionally, and we're going back, whatever, but they've replaced the engines at 20 years.
Mhm,
You got 25 out of the ladder truck, but we're operating with an engine now at 23 years.
mhm.
And I'm not saying to replace it, but,
Think about it.
well, we're getting into,
That's all
like,
it is.
just, and the thing is, 17, 23, and 19, that's a scary, we're talking about over $1 million in our fleet there that could all just have problems together. So,
That's my argument.
but I think we're being responsible. I know we established that fund and then we used it to repower 429 that had the engine failure back in 3-4 years ago, yeah. So there is some money in there. And the concern also becomes, in the past couple, it hasn't been that bad in the past 12 months, but I would say the 2 years before that, it's a real issue when we have 2 engines and then a small utility vehicle. And when one of the engines is out of service, we're not an effective fire department. We're using auto aid and things like that, but we have responsibilities and that's an issue. I mean, honestly, I'd like to transition 430 into some kind of vehicle that can satisfy the engine requirements smaller wise, but because it's a big issue when an engine's out of service. When that engine was out for a while, we actually went to Wardsboro and borrowed an engine for that we lucked out on, but we needed to. So I'll keep you updated. We're not talking about replacement right now, which is good. We maintain them, and they're not high mileage, which is good, but I don't know. I'm just saying.
The only bad thing is, when you want to replace one, what are you looking at, almost 18 months out because of having them built?
It's definitely a year
Yeah.
process.
And you have the situation where they have to be squatty because of the garage door? At the.
Yeah, I mean, that's not the biggest issue. I mean, it kind of rules out an aerial device, and that was the main reason why it didn't get replaced. Yeah, the height,
Yeah.
it is a low door.
So really, you have to start thinking about it a good year before you need to replace one, is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
So that it's here when the time frame is there. And.
I will say this, if one failed and we were going to buy a new one, most of those companies are taking trade-in from somebody else, so I mean, that would not be my biggest fear. If we were ordering from a certain company, I'm not saying they would give us anything good to hold on to in the meantime, but they would give us a bucket of bolts while we were waiting for the
A
delivery.
loaner.
So,
But-
I mean, that's not the
Yeah.
biggest deal, but yeah.
And the price of a new engine, brand new, is.
Definitely 500,000.
Right. So
No.
regardless of how much is in the reserve, there's gonna be a borrowing in order to buy one, so.
Yeah.
So at some point, that's.
Well, I
Unless
mean,
we're
if
lucky
we
and
can
go out.
maintain, well, like, so we closed that SCBA project out, those are that's quite expensive equipment. Lifespan on those is at least 10 years. I mean, and that's when you're following like the consensus standard. For us, we can get 20 out of them for the most part, and we did with those. So that's a big expense we're not worrying about. And we replace a little bit of firefighting, you know, PPE per year, which is kind of constant in there. So if we stay on this path and we can get 50 grand in there for the next, however, 5 years, that will really put us in a decent position, but, yeah.
How much have we squirreled away?
I don't have that number up here tonight.
I have it too, but, yeah.
You know, I would say we've probably got 100 something to 200,000 for the
In
engine.
just apparatus?
Just
I
the
don't,
engine.
I don't think we
I
have that
don't think
much.
it's that much.
Well,
Maybe with this 50,000, it's approaching it, but,
right, there was
well, we.
There was
we can
10
look
put
at-
in, and another 30, that's 40, that'd be about 100 grand, probably at this point. After we do the 50 that's in this budget. So, you know, you're still quite a ways from the cost of one.
But
but-
it's better to have
Yeah,
something.
it's gonna help.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions for the chief? I think your budget looks great, chief, to be honest with you.
I would just say the other is, you know, we saved a little for the command vehicle. We have 2 chiefs, 2 command vehicles. One of them is turning 10 this year. I'm not asking to replace it. It does have rust, it's not like a perfect thing.
It does
We
or
were-
does not?
It does have rust, it's not like in perfect condition, but again, we also realize how many miles we put on those, and it's not that high either. We were honestly exploring the used vehicle market from some of our more affluent neighbors. But, they don't wanna part with this vehicle that they thought they were gonna, but a diesel pickup truck would satisfy a bunch of things, right? You know, the ability to throw equipment in, it would give us more functions, right? You know, with pump outs and running along the tracks. So we were looking at that, but apparently who we were talking to doesn't wanna part with it or whatever. But my point is, I think that's worth exploring. I know in the past and you know, there was some issues with getting used ones, but I think for the amount of miles we put on it, if we need to replace in the future and there's something that would increase our capabilities and is a solid vehicle, we should look at it.
Are you suggesting that a pickup truck could be an assistant chief's vehicle?
Right. I mean, a vehicle is not gonna leave the village, so, I mean, or the chief's vehicle, one of the two, not leaving the village. It could tow, I mean, lots of places are now using pickups with a cab as chief's vehicles. First of all, cheaper than like a full-size Suburban. And now, I mean, all we've been talking about is cancer and contamination in this. Totally separated gear and stuff from, you know, the regular driving space. So it just makes sense in that reason. But for us, if we had dirty stuff, we could throw it in the back. If we had to go down along the tracks, we can do that. We have storms and pump outs. So to me, it was like the expanded capabilities with, you know, a vehicle that could pull a trailer, things like that. So we'll keep our eyes out, and if that opportunity presents itself and there's a vehicle that can give us a good amount of time, isn't too expensive, and fulfills that role, we will propose that. But I think it's worth considering a used vehicle, because I think based on our use and stuff, it could fit if it's the right one. And we would obviously yield to having, you know, the village garage weigh in, look at the vehicle and weigh in if that presented itself.
Okay. Okay, move on. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sergeant, and thanks for that year-end report, that was great.
Sit down right here, John.
Yes.
Before we get too far into the sewer, the items that John put in, just to mention a couple things. I left some money in for engineering, obviously, with the big project that's proposed down there, that'll be part of any borrowing. Contingency, I dropped it some from 70 to 30,000. We just haven't been using up the contingency monies. There's still 13,000 in street administration, which gets transferred to the general fund. Under the salary line, you'll see it went down a little bit. I don't know how the 210,000 was arrived at. I've done quite a worksheet on salaries, giving an increase based on not having a contract, but I've given an increase to the employees down there.
Of what figure? 2?
I went current up 2, and then I took that number and went up another 2, because there would be retro involved in it. So I think that the number I put in is very reasonable.
Well, it's
For what-
reasonable for this venue, but that's being discussed with the unions. It might not, that might be, end up being a little high.
Yeah.
It might be low, but we'll see.
All right.
But I know you need an X number, so that's an X number.
All right, and debt service is based on just what we'll be paying out next year. The bond anticipation note, that was part of the $730,000 BAN that's coming due tomorrow. The sewer part of that is being paid off tomorrow, the 155 plus the interest. We are renewing the BAN tomorrow, or actually, tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow. First is the new one, Friday is the payoff. We're renewing a BAN for $450,000, which has to do with the money that's still owed on painting the water tanks, how many years ago? And that's in the general fund. Right?
So that ban is reflected in the general fund here?
Yeah. The amount that we are paying off on that over the next, that BAN that we're renewing tomorrow will be paid off over the next 3 years. I couldn't get it any quicker than that, and we have plenty of room to borrow on it.
I'm just trying to figure out, would it be advantageous to log it under water versus the general fund?
That's where it is. I'm sorry,
Oh,
it's in water fund, I'm sorry.
okay.
Painting the water tanks was water. All right, the vehicle reserve, I don't think you had anything in to set it up, but I put 10 in again to put for a new vehicle for you. And under interfund transfers, there's a 50,000 transfer that's being made to the general fund, that's been made for the last number of years. That's, along with the 13 offsets the costs in the general fund that do the work for sewer, such as sending out their bills, collecting their money and doing their payroll and paying bills. The new item is an interfund transfer to the capital fund. And again, referring back to the big project that's proposed, I took the 155 plus the interest and I said, well, let's transfer 150 into the capital fund towards this capital project. What that'll do is, probably in the next budget, 1920, we'll be able to do another 150. So we'll have 300,000 put aside against what we'll potentially have to borrow against an $800,000 or so project. And if I didn't do something like this as a transfer, with not having the budget for a BAN payment, we would have excess revenues coming in versus the expenditures. So I said it was a wise decision to fund a capital project that we know is going to be done, correct? And we have an idea that it's going to be in excess of 150,000 at this point. So that's the extent of what As far as the benefits, they're,
A question on something you already went over. The reserve fund for vehicle reserve, we're putting 10,
yeah,
and what will that bring it to, 20 or stays?
I, off the top of my head, can't tell you, Joe, because I didn't bring that number up. All right, we've put
Isn't
in
it 30?
10, it's probably gonna be, bring it up to about 30, maybe even 40, I have those numbers, but not up here. We can get those for the next meeting, and I'll have what's in each of the reserve funds as of May of 2017.
John, let's see what this one.
Yeah, well, it should be around 40 because that vehicle is 2013 and they've been putting 10 in every year before that, so
So, yeah, that's the old vehicle, 2013.
that's the only vehicle we have in sewer, yeah.
All right, as of May 17, there was 30,000 in it. There's 10 in the 17-18 budget, that'll bring it to 40, and we're putting another 10 in to bring it up to 50, which would probably more than pay for a vehicle going forward. I can tell you the sewer one, but the general I can't tell by, because it's all lumped into one reserve number.
Okay.
All right, so again, the benefits built into the health insurance is what we're currently paying for the months through the payment in November, and I've increased the monthly payments by 5% for health insurance. Where do we get 5%? It's a number. If we have anything better before we adopt, I'll change numbers around, but I think we're close because of what health insurance has gone up the last couple of years. All right, so
How many employees does that cover?
Down there.
Yeah, more or less.
3.
3, okay.
Murphy doesn't, Murphy's, I don't know whether Murphy's charged to,
Hey,
A fund? All right, Murphy's charged to A fund as opposed to sewer, as a retiree.
Okay.
So, you know, we've got a number in, is it how close it'll be? It all depends on what health insurance does, when they come out with the January 1st, amount, which is paid in December for January. We're always paying the bill 1 month ahead of time, so. All right, and the rest of the health, benefits are all based on what we're currently paying. There is something that I read that state retirement looks like it's gonna go up a little bit in the next year, so I kind of left it where it was. If I get anything better before we adopt, we'll make changes.
Looking at your worksheet, John, that you handed in, I remember this, for me, being an issue the last time. We're gonna have to come up with a form, although I would like you to actually come up with a form. We look here, sewer pipe and fittings, $1,000. I wanna know what it is this year. In other words, what's in the budget this year? That's how much you want next year. What was this year? And I'm just giving you that one. I'm saying the whole thing, all the way down the line. It becomes helpful for us.
I have that right here. That's what this is, what we put in for last year.
Okay, but I don't,
Yeah,
I want that over here.
yeah. I didn't have those numbers to do that comparative one.
Yeah, it's just,
I'll now have-
it becomes
I have no
interesting,
idea
and
where
how much did we go up
Those
or
numbers
down?
were from last year.
Yeah.
They're amongst the missing. I didn't bother going to department
Where's
heads.
the electric?
I said, next year,
Where's
when
your
we do
electric
it, we'll
one?
have a column,
It's right here.
which will move these over. And John put in.
How much did you put in for electric?
15,000,
I
but
just
you're
don't-
on the wrong.
I didn't have the ability to get some of the
Oh, no.
information.
You got
but I-
50.
This was last.
Yeah, you got 1,500 now.
Where you went, that, yeah, G8120.
Well, that's for the Pellwood only.
Yeah. this is-
Okay, what
this
is,
Glen Lane is 2,700,
Havens Road is 18,
and Havens Road is 18.
and, what is the main plant?
This year, it's,
Here it is, 32,000. 32 and 18 and 27.
Okay.
Yeah, last year, it went down, last year it was 36
Okay. Okay.
for the main plant.
I'm not gonna beat this. Next year, I wanna see, I want these figures, if they're approved this year, over here, and then your new ones over here. Okay?
You went down electric
Yep, for the main plant,
based on just,
based on the building from this year. Yeah, so, yeah.
Is that based on that
And it's also based on,
unit not running at full
No.
capacity?
no, it wasn't running, that wasn't down long. That's different.
Okay.
But the newer equipment that we've gotten over the years
It's
is
better.
more, yes.
okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
You're comfortable with your chemicals?
Yeah. That's the only thing that we do every year. I don't know, I don't understand why we do it, but it's still done this way. We put numbers in the budget for chemicals, but we don't bid them until June 1st. So we're basing our numbers basically on, if they could go up, and it did happen under the previous administration, I bid, I put in for 2,000 for chlorine cylinders, and it ended up being 2,500, but
That's an issue that came up, and we need to, we can correct that. And we should. So we have to figure out, so what is this? This is March, so we have to go back to sometime in the winter and go out to bid.
yeah.
You bid January, February.
Yeah, okay. All right. And then about the same with water.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And you're comfortable with the emergency numbers that are in here for sewer main repair, replacement, and?
Well, we raised them a little bit because of what happened this year, but that's kind of, you know, we put that, there was two things that happened this year. Usually we do have one thing every year, but this year there was a couple things that happened out in the system.
Where on here, if at all, is the RBC and the belt press?
No, on there.
But these are, what were this is last year's, this year that we're in. And so were these items done?
Yep.
They were.
Yeah.
That's genius, it's like.
The main big items will be the capital project,
Mhm.
and that'll have, won't even be in here, other than eventually paying off whatever borrowing we might have to do. And I don't think we're even close to getting a number yet on what the total is gonna be.
Couple months, we'll have the engineer's estimate.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, he came down, last week, Mike, I think it was his name, and he said within 2 to 3 weeks, we would have a draft. And then he would bring it to us, we would go over it, and then if we're good with it, they'll do the final thing, so.
so really the earliest that you're looking at bidding is probably April, early May.
And then somewhere before that, I and Ralph and Gina will speak to the board about our couple of meetings with Mr. Russell Budd about low interest and grants. And another scenario that could also happen with getting a chunk of money to pay for these items that are down at the plant. So we'll bring that to you.
But as soon as we get some real number of what the engineers are projecting, along with their engineering fees, any legal, anything like that, the board will have to pass some kind of a bond resolution, because that does take 30 to 60 days after we get it presented with publications and what have you. So we do need to have that ability to borrow. Doesn't mean we borrow if we set a BAN at 900,000 and we only need 7. That's what we borrow. We don't. We'll have the authority to borrow up to 9, but or whatever the number is. But I don't want to get caught short where we issue a contract and we haven't gotten the bond resolution passed. So the steps are engineer, preliminary, final numbers, cost-wise, presented VAN, get that started, and then they can start putting a bid package together. But by the time the bids come in, we should have the VAN, all the approvals we need through publication and what have you, so.
Joe Calamico's, am I saying his last
Mike
name?
Colaseco.
Mike, so,
Yeah.
one of you doesn't say hello.
You have to be, oh no, you aren't.
Just so you know, just
I know the way you are.
yeah, it doesn't matter. He's talking to that guy at the state about also looking at how we save energy, so he's gonna get back to you. Okay?
We're gonna, yeah, thank you, and we're going to have a meeting with him.
Right.
Because some of us don't understand it really at all, and so we need to, and so we'll set that up.
And on the revenue side in the sewer fund, the amount from sewer rents decreased coming from village residents because we already know the June and December billings. And based on that, the amount that we will have collected in the current year has gone down a little bit from the budgeted amount. So I did decrease what I'm projecting going forward based on the current year's budget and what we billed. So that's a fairly good number, I feel. The billing for other governments, that's only a small amount. That's not what I'm looking at here. But based on actual billings, that's how I got that number. Obviously, it's a factor based on what the water is, and we won't know what the total water for the May billing is until we bill it. So water is more of a projection when we get into the water fund the next time.
We just had a run done, so by the time you next meet, we might have a number for you, Ralph, to go with.
But other than that, no appropriation of surplus is needed in the sewer fund. We do have a decent fund balance in sewer. We've got a fund balance of we got a little over 600,000 unappropriated fund balance.
Okay, so I think it's fair, I don't think it's getting out in front of my headlights here, but it's important that the public know, if I'm right, water rates and sewer rates are not going up.
Right.
So even though we haven't done the water budget yet, the water is not going up and the sewer's not going up. I think that's important.
It should be sufficient for this budget.
Anything for John? Yes, ma'am.
Just one question, Ralph mentioned he put 5,000 in for engineer, and John has an amount of 15 for engineer.
Yeah, you have it.
Is that
when
the
you
same?
close. And there's a line for engineering in the budget, so that makes it be 20,000 available.
Well, I raised it based on this project, but I didn't.
But
So-
the project, engineering for the project is going to be part of the,
Okay,
so we might have a little extra room for expenditures there.
okay.
But I wouldn't cut it back at this point because,
So leave the 15.
yeah, we're gonna leave, I'd leave the 15 and the 5, just because.
Because, I'll tell you why, because the plant is past its life expectancy. I don't wanna say the plant is old, but the plant is old.
Yeah, but you might need some engineering on something else.
Okay.
Or you might have, instead of 2 or 3 major sewer problem breaks, maybe you're gonna have 3 or 4. Well, and we don't need that engineering for the new project, we have plenty of it in there for those. So, if nothing else, you don't spend it, you accumulate into fund balance, and maybe we can take even more out in a future year against the big project.
So what you're saying is all the engineering that he's doing for the draft of the new belt press?
Right.
They're gonna put that bill on hold and it's gonna be part of,
It'll be paid out of the borrowings,
okay,
okay? And as long as they don't bill us for that, any of that work until June 1, we're gonna have 150 in the capital project already, so that if we need to, we can start paying engineering bills.
And then put it back.
Well, we're not putting it back. It's the 150 is gonna go over to the capital fund,
Okay.
and we pay it out of capital against the project called sewer improvements, or whatever we call that project.
okay.
All right, so, are they gonna bill before that? They realize it's gonna be a capital project, and they realize there's gonna be a substantial borrowing. So, their bill is gonna sit over here until,
I'll talk to them.
yeah, oh,
They know already.
They
but-
know.
Yeah, but it's,
They work on these projects all the time.
yeah, but I want them to know.
Yeah, so it's not that we're not gonna pay them, it's just gonna be 2 months from the time they bill it.
It's gonna get small checks to get one big.
Yeah. So that's the way that goes, so it's. All right?
Yes.
John, thank you.
No problem. Well, that, those are the, just so everybody knows, the GA 120, that's the sewer means, that went up 2,600 because of what happened this year. But the plant budget, GA 130 actually went down $6,000.
All right,
Thank you.
I think that was it for tonight, what we were scheduled to talk about. We've got a meeting on the 6th for DPW and water. And then the 12th is basically going over the total budget and making adjustments. People on the board want to make adjustments, and hopefully we don't have to meet on the 13th.
Okay, Jana, we are complete here tonight. Do you need anything?
I'm good.
Okay. Okay, shut it down.
Motion to adjourn? Need that?
Well, that's what I was saying, okay.
Oh.
Motion by Charlie, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Howard, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Thank you.